Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. Everything you see here is for sale today. Names, references, and when available prices in the description below. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com with any questions you have about any of these watches. Prices are not listed in some cases. You can reach out to me at this address and get a quote. If you're interested in selling or trading a watch, we are always interested in building inventory. We will buy one watch or an entire collection with no upper limit on value paid. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com to sell or trade a watch. Jumping straight in, let's talk about sports watches, and let's talk about a big one. Right here, the discontinued Patek Philippe 5711 with silver dial. So 40 millimeters in stainless steel. The watch is only 8.6 millimeters thick, but 120 meters water resistant. This is the most legible of the 5711 variants, as it has a silver white dial with blackened white gold hands and indices for outstanding contrast. Throw it on the wrist. It's an easy one to wear too. On my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it has the attractive quality of sitting almost flush, flat, and very much like a dress watch. It's a true dual range type of timepiece. Formal attire, informal attire, the boardroom, the boardwalk, pool table, or the pool, this watch is up to it. Now you can see the bracelet is nicely made and it is truly handsome. You'll appreciate the fact that there are small details like this transitional bevel along the shoulders that continue perfectly aligned from link to link and even through the flank of the lug hoods. The caliber is simple but time-honored, a very accurate watch, upgraded with an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring. This is caliber 324 automatic winding 45-hour power reserve quickset, and of course beautifully hand-finished in the fashion that Patek Philippe watches tend to be. But if you want something that's just a little bit more contemporary in look and feel, then you want a watch that was new for 2019, the 42.2 millimeter white gold Patek Philippe Aquanaut 5168G. This is the 010 with olive green dial and matching composite strap. Now, it is still a very thin watch, 8.5 millimeters thick, but 42.2 with a broader stance across the wrist. It has more wrist presence. Still very flat and very comfortable to wear on my wrist. You can see it's a good match in terms of fit, but it's also a great match if you have a slightly bigger wrist, and a standard 5167 or 5711 is not really going to fit your wrist or look right proportionally. This is a great way to upgrade. Now, this watch has spectacular lume, but it also has the same 120 meter water resistance that you get on the 5711. So this is a true full-featured sports watch. I'm going to show you this watch in the dark. We'll do a quick lume shot here. And you can see not only are the numerals lumed, but so are the indices outboard of the lume. This is a very attractive, wear it all the time, sleep in it type of timepiece. And of course, you've got that same caliber 324 on the reverse side with identical fit, finish, and technical specifications. Let's go back to the lume shots for a sec. We'll intro with the lume shot here. You're probably already guessing what this is based on the skeleton style hands and the differential lume for the minute and the bezel pearl. Green, green, and blue. This is the new for 2019 Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter chronograph, but this is a special series watch that evokes the original 1993 Diver 300 meter chronograph. That watch was available in a rather rare and expensive but celebrated triple tone metallic option, and this watch continues that tradition. These are individually numbered with a rose gold plate on the flank. You can see a combination of rose gold, gray, titanium, and then blue-gray tantalum. You can see the intermediate links are tantalum flanked by rose gold. The bezel is that lovely purple-hued tantalum material, and then the insert is a handsome frosted rose gold piece with polished, raised, and relieved numerals and indices. The dial is made of ceramic, a combination of polished and matte blue ceramic, 300 meters water-resistant helium escape valve, 60-hour power reserve. You've got a remarkably deluxe folding clasp here. As you can see, it includes a fold-out dive extension, but then there's also a trigger that gives you 9.6 millimeters of incremental adjustment. Note the use of ceramic pin snaps internally to maintain the tight tolerances of this clasp over time. Twin trigger release, very solid. Flip it all over, you can see master chronometer caliber 9900. Full balance bridge, free sprung for shock resistance with a rotor bearing rather than a jeweled staff, anti-magnetic hairspring, coaxial escapement, stop seconds, vertical clutch, column wheel, all the refinements you'd expect, and it is a master chronometer. So it meets and exceeds the COSC standards as a fully cased up watch, but the master chronometer standard also includes water resistance, shock resistance, anti-magnetic tests, winding efficiency, and power reserve tests. It is a more thorough test of the full watch. We're going to do another Lume Shot here. You probably already know what family this is, but you know which model? Let's see if you guessed right. It is the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Tribute to Mil-Spec. 40.3 millimeters in stainless steel. This is a 2017 limited edition of 500 pieces designed to celebrate the early days of these 50 Fathoms dive watch. This one recalls the late 1950s, and it is the 5008 reference, which is a much more wearable 40.3 rather than the 45 of the standard 50 Fathoms, but it still has the lovely cambered sapphire cap on the bezel that allows the full bezel to be cambered. 120 click, wonderfully refined. It has the moisture indicator on the dial that the original 1950s 50 Fathoms models would have featured. It would change a uniform color if water were to intrude, and yes, this one is functional. A minimalist printed rather than applique dial, but you get a high horology movement on the reverse side. It's caliber 1151, 4 days of power reserve, silicone hairspring, free sprung, and beautifully finished, as you can see. We'll get a little bit closer. The beveling in particular deserves attention as it's broad and bright, and you do not need any kind of optics to appreciate the finish on this movement. It is that overt and that fine. The details are gorgeous, yes, but even the large surfaces, the architecture, the size of the bevels, the black polish of the screw, the triple finish on the rotor, for example, it deserves to be called out as some of the best you'll find in this class, and the watch still stainless steel, and because it's only 13.3 millimeters thick, it's on a sailcloth strap. It wears very comfortably on a smaller wrist. Let's bend that strap around my wrist a little bit and then get a look at it. You can see it's a great size. This is a Rolex rival, as it is the proper size to rival a standard Submariner. 40.3 millimeters, the timepiece on a strap will give you a different aesthetic than a modern sub. A little bit more of a vintage look, but also it's easier to adjust in the field if you have to make small changes to the sizing. Sticking with sports watches here, we're going to talk about F.P. Journe. Francois-Paul Journe, back in 2011, decided to launch his first sports watch. It was the Santograph Sport. A year later, in 2012, he launched the Octo Sport. And this is the precious, rare, and rarely built black aluminum Octo Sport. So this is a watch that was part of a family made from 2012 through 2014. There was a very narrow band of time in which Journe built the aluminum-cased Octo Sports. The blackened models, which are even more scratch-resistant, are scarcer still. So given that there was a very short window in which these were made, this is an extraordinary example, both for its rarity and its condition. As you will note, there's not a single visible scratch. The timepiece includes a dial that is fully lumed, and you'll note when we do the Lume Shot that the numerals are actually solid blocks of lume that are placed on the dial. Power reserve indicator, 120 hours chronometric. It'll actually run for 160. Double-digit date, red on silver, a day-night indicator, and a white smoked sapphire with a external bezel and polished bolts for the sub-seconds. Flip it all over and you can see one of the most attractive features of these Journe Octo Sports. The movement, which is caliber 1300, you recognize it from the Octo series, but instead of brass or rose gold here, it's all aluminum. So aluminum on the outside, aluminum on the inside. The later watches from 2014 were titanium on the outside, aluminum on the inside. This one is all aluminum, and as a result, it is almost toy-like in its lightness and lack of mass. And you can see there's a special rotor used on these models exclusive to the Octo Sports. Lume Shot real quick, coming up. And you can see the three-dimensional quality of these numerals. They really do have height above the dial. A wonderfully distinctive looking watch on a vulcanized rubber strap. This is the way to get into Journe for summer 2021. Okay, sports watch detox. You guys know I'm a fan of dress watches, and most of the watches I've owned over the years have been dress watches. This is the Vacheron Constantin Traditionnel Automatique watch that is 38 millimeters. As you can see, white gold, Very substantial, but slight. Under 8 millimeters thick with lovely fluted lugs. You can see that the case band itself has articulation by virtue of its step and then the fluting of the lugs. Vacheron always sweating details. The dial features two different silver satin grains. One is more metallic and it forms the minutes track, and then inboard we have more of a white silver satin or opaline frosted finish, a sunken race for the sub-seconds, a stepped date window for more elegant transition from dial to date disc, and then at center half frosted Dauphine style hands. That's how you know it is the traditionnel as opposed to the patrimony. Patrimony has baton hands. You will appreciate this watch has all the refinements you expect of a high horology dress watch, including a slim profile, elegance, grace, compatibility with a small wrist, and all applique white gold indices on the dial that are nicely faceted, so depending on the angle they twinkle like cut gems. Now you do have both stop seconds and a quick set date, features that are not automatic on high horology movements, even modern ones. Caliber 2455, manufacture movement, 40-hour power reserve. You can see there is a lovely engraved 22 karat mass, not 21, not 18 karat, not tungsten, 22 carats, and it has been engraved with a rose lathe, and it features several different finishes, including the guilloche, frosting, polish, and satination, all of that with a mirror beveled edge. Poisson de Genève, you have the Geneva hallmark on the movement, and of course the watch meets the standards of the Geneva hallmark or Geneva stamp, which is available for certain qualifying watches made in the city or canton of Geneva, and it has been a imprimatur of high horology finish since the 1880s. Throw the watch on my wrist one more time. It's a simple white gold pin buckle, easy to wear, very comfortable, very flat, flush, unobtrusive, easily slides underneath the dress cuff, but impeccable elegance and not a generic design. Vacheron got a little bit adventurous here with the horizontally opposed date window and small seconds. You also note there's a paucity of printing on this dial. It's not over-branded. Even the marquee is relatively compact. That said, if I'm buying a Vacheron dress watch from today's show, it's going to be this, because this, reference 49005, is as good as it gets. Launched in 1992, it is an automatic winding platinum perpetual calendar chronograph, one of very, very few automatic winding Vacheron perpetual calendar chronograph dress watches. Fewer than 300 were crafted in platinum, and this is one of them. Note that it has a sigma dial, meaning the hands as well as the indices are all white gold. The timepiece features bilateral symmetry, in fact cruciform symmetry. You can cut it both ways, vertically and horizontally, and it will be symmetrical. The moon phase has an adjustment interval of once every 122 years, and the perpetual calendar need not be adjusted until the year 2100. Inside, it's a Frédéric Piguet automatic with a vertical clutch and a column wheel, and the column wheel feel is outstanding. Automatic winding, 40-hour power reserve. You can see the platinum case is extensively handcrafted, polished by hand. The lugs inserted into slots in the case band, welded on, and then hand finished to create these seamless, sharp breaks between the case and the lug. If you ask why I'm calling a seam seamless, what I mean to say is that there's no evidence of a weld here. You see the facing of the lug and the facing of the case, and then a super sharp, almost razor-like cleft line between them. That takes traditional craft knowledge. And on the reverse side, you can see the timepiece, old school with the Helvetic head hallmark, and although 38 millimeters, it has a nice weight to it because of the use of platinum. It's impressive on the wrist too, wonderfully unobtrusive, low-key, not the kind of watch that declares either your ego or your wealth, and yet impeccable quality, pedigree, and provenance. This is the kind of watch that another connoisseur will appreciate, a truly special opportunity, as we've only had one of these in platinum in the 7 years I've been doing this. Let's talk about one more from Journe. Okay, so the Tokyo boutique opened up in 2003, and it was FP Journe's first factory-owned store, his first factory boutique. And so, starting with the first anniversary and continuing on through, in the case of this watch, 2016, Journe has released special Tokyo Boutique anniversary models. Inevitably, they feature a nickel anthracite coating with a rose gold gilt-style printed dial. Bezels on dials include satin finish with rose gold fixing bolts, and the most distinctive features are the limited production and the combination of grade 5 titanium with rose gold on the case. Now, this is the Santograph. The watch launched in in 2016 to celebrate the anniversary of the boutique. With only 10 of these made, this is one of the rarest Tokyo Boutique limited editions. Now you can see on the dial some of those features really popped. Instead of using a black polished bezel to frame the sub-registers, here we have satin finish. Instead of black polished steel screws, here we have rose gold screws. You can see that each of the registers has been expanded. The standard Santograph features tachymeter scales on all 3 registers. Here, those are obviated, allowing the centers to be opened up, and you can actually see through the smoked sapphire and appreciate the mechanism that underlies the Santograph system. So you have the 360,000 vibration per hour secondary escapement underneath the tourbillon. It is a 1/100th of a second tourbillon, which is the namesake of the watch, Santograph. It can measure 1/100th of a second, and it makes 1 circuit per second. This is the 20-second register. This is the 10-minute register. It is a very special piece. There is a patent for the rocker, which allows the watch to look like a mono pusher, but start, stop, and restart like a conventional 2-pusher chronograph, and there is a wonderful little bit of horological theater in the resetting of this watch. Manual wind, 80-hour power reserve. Here we have a full rose gold movement. So the watch is made of a combination of rose gold and titanium externally. Being full gold inside, it does have an impressive weight. The second patent issued for this watch was the combination drive system. So the chronograph drives off the axle or arbor of the barrel, and then the toothed edge of the barrel drives the time. As a result, when you start the chronograph, you don't suffer the loss of amplitude that a conventional chronograph would. Conventional chronographs will lose 30 or more degrees of balance amplitude when the chronograph starts up. The result is lost time. This watch doesn't have that problem. And as you can see, a full rose gold deployant clasp, a feature rarely included on FP Journe timepieces. Let's talk a little bit about Patek Philippe and one of my all-time favorites. In-house calibers mean nothing, and this watch is proof of that. If a watch is beautiful front and back, it does not matter where the movement came from. Though I don't think anyone will fault Patek Philippe for using, in this 2004 to 2008 Rose Gold 5070 series, the CH2770. This one's an all-timer. It's based on the Lemania 2310 that, amongst other things, went to the moon as the Omega 321. The Lemania base is immensely improved by Patek Philippe. What changes? Well, it gets Geneva hallmark finish, a capped column wheel, power reserve goes from 48 hours to 65 hours, the flat hairspring is replaced by an overcoil, the unadjusted movement is adjusted in 6 positions, and of course it is free sprung rather than the standard Lemania's mobile stud index. All of that, and it's a gorgeous column wheel lateral clutch. Steel parts satinated on their tops, beveled on their edges. Brass parts rhodium plated with Côte de Genève across their tops, beveling on their edges, and then engine turning on the base plate with all screw heads black polished and all slots chamfered. Launched in 1998, the original 5070 was a yellow gold model with a black dial, inspired by the vintage reference 2512, which was actually an enormous watch of over 46 millimeters. That prototype birthed the dial layout and the case shape of this watch, but you can see there are a number of tricks to allow a 42 millimeter watch to work with a traditionally sized movement. There are twin concentric scales outboard on the dial, so you don't notice how narrow the registers are. You'll also note that the dial uses rose gold applique and that it's a darker than standard silver. It's somewhere between gray and silver, giving it more force. You can also see that Patek stepped the case band in from the edge with a multiply tiered pagoda style bezel, and then the lugs have a wonderful fluted profile to them. You can see these two are welded on, and you always look at the lug profiles with 5070s. You look at the sharpness of the bezel in the case and then the amount of fluting left on the lug profiles. The sharper the character lines, the fluting, and the edges of the bezel, the less the watch has been refinished, and this is an outstanding example. In fact, this example is outstanding inside and out because these are only about 46, 47 millimeters lug to lug. Despite being 42 millimeters, they wear quite easily on a smaller wrist. They're also quite flat at under 12 millimeters thick, so this is a great all-timer and all-arounder. A dress watch, yes, but a watch that seems eager to dress down and be worn casually too. And in fact, I know folks who've worn their 5070s both ways. By the way, rarity. The later 5170 was built with effectively no restrictions on its production because this watch was partly dependent on getting and finishing the Lemania movements. They only made about 250 per year per metal. And because this watch was made for only 4 years, you automatically know approximately how many were made. How many are still in this condition? Even fewer still. This is a great opportunity to get into a classic Patek chronograph. Let's talk about a value proposition that has an important place in history. This is the Ulysse Nardin San Marco GMT Plus Minus, 40 millimeters in stainless steel with a true tritium dial and 100 meters of water resistant. This watch launched in 1994 with the Ludwig Oxland's GMT Plus Minus system. It's an ETA 2892 base with a module that allows the hour hand to be set independently, and you can see there is a 24-hour display over at 9 o'clock. When you pull the crown, you adjust everything in sync. And you can see how that 24-hour system jumps. You can also appreciate that we have a bidirectional quick set date, not something you'll find on a standard ETA caliber. So the module here includes 3 complications: the stepping hour hand, the jumping second time zone hour indicator, and the bidirectionally quick settable double-digit date. Now this is a very cool watch with a true tritium dial, and I'll demonstrate what that means in just a sec. Get a little bit closer. You can see it has that lovely patina fade. Now there's no water damage, no tarnish, no signs of contact. Everything has aged equally and evenly. Original tritium signed and intact, both hands and dial base. This is no Fotina. This is the real deal. And you can see the Lion of San Marco from Venice on the reverse side. A wonderfully compact watch. These ETA calibers, especially with solid casebacks, are super flat on the wrist. And you can see this watch is a very high quality trigger actuated deployant clasp, a feature that was uncommon at the time. It's nice and low slung. It's a sports watch, make no mistake. Being steel, automatic, and 100 meters, it's a sports watch. But it's also compact in the way a lot of early to mid-90s sports watches are, and it would work equally well as a dress watch. The style of this watch has aged better than a lot of Ulysse Nardin watches from the 90s and 2000s, and this one looks just as fashionable today as it would have back in 1994. Now, in the world of sports watches, this watch is somewhat of an in-betweener. Part dress watch, part sports watch, but impressive in both regards. This is a model launched in 2019. It is the Bulgari Octo Chronograph GMT, still super slim at 6.9 millimeters thick in titanium. The watch is 42 millimeters, but you wouldn't know it from just how flat and light it wears. The case, the bracelet, the clasp, even the satin finished dial are titanium. You can see that the case is handsomely detailed. The Octo Finissimo case profile, which supposedly has over 100 individual facets. You can also see that the dial features what appears to be a tri-register chronograph at first glance, but it's actually a GMT, as we have the ability to step the local hour hand using a pushover at 9 o'clock, and then there is a 24-hour dial at 3 o'clock that you adjust when you pull the crown and adjust everything in sync. We also have a crisp column wheel chronograph and caliber BVL 318 based on the 2018 caliber 288, which was an automatic winding ultra-thin tourbillon. They could very easily have just grafted a chronograph GMT module on top of the standard Octo Finissimo Automatics 138, but instead they took the 288 from the tourbillon, which gave them a platinum peripheral rotor, and effectively like a donut, the chronograph GMT mechanism was stuck in the middle. You could see the black polished column wheel on the reverse side. The finishing is as good or better relative to what you'll find from standard watches built by Zenith, Audemars Piguet, La Suite Originale, and Jaeger-LeCoultre. This is a small step above those, so you're talking serious high horology. 55-hour power reserve. Thanks to the peripheral winder, this movement, which is over 37 millimeters across and thus broad to fill the case back, is still only 3.3 millimeters thick, so super slim, preserving the profile of the watch. Now, though it's a 42 and the standard Octo Finissimo is a 40, it doesn't feel huge. You can see on my wrist, it's a good match and it's super slim as ever. There's a difference in size, but it's not something that's tangible. Even to the eye, it looks as flat as the original 2017 Octo Finissimo Automatic. Probably the most impressive all-around sports complication you can find from Bulgari. And while it's not a swimmable watch at 3 ATM water resistance, it is very much a sports casual watch. Shorts, t-shirt, you better believe it, this watch is going to hold up. This is a watch you can wear anytime except in the pool. Here's another take on a high horology sports watch from H. Moser & C. This is the Heritage Centerseconds. It is their pilot style watch, and it includes a lot of their signatures. Starting outboard, wire style lugs, but note the hollows of the case band that have been coined. Moser always has a dramatic and distinctive case profile, even as the case designs and the profile designs are specific to the model lines. You have those lovely welded style lugs to celebrate the early pilot's watches, which often were built from pocket watch centers with lugs welded on. we have a dial that, like the FP Journe, uses solid blocks of luminova for the numerals, but in Moser fashion, you get their celebrated and well-known funky blue coloration and their fume fade from light to dark. You also have broadsword hands, a railroad track style minutes and seconds track outboard, minimal printing. You do get stop seconds. Note it is a no-date dial. Flip it over. Caliber HMC 200, automatic winding, 3-day power reserve, and a rugged architecture with a rotor bearing rather than a more fragile jeweled staff, and a full balance bridge with a free-sprung index for shock tolerance. It uses a magic lever style pawl-based bidirectional winding system, and it is 42 millimeters in stainless steel. Throw it on the wrist. It is super comfortable. One of the comfiest Mosers you're going to find, and in steel, this is a watch that's rugged enough that you can pull sleeves over it all day long and it's not going to scratch. Do a quick Lume Shot here. Moser, out of Schaffhausen, Switzerland, is a neighbor to IWC, and they make about 1,500 watches a year, whereas IWC makes about 100,000, so you get a sense of the differing scales. You can also see here that those blocks of lume on the dial have 3 dimensions to them, so the dial isn't flat both day and night. It's a very impressive piece. Now, independent horology is going sky high here as we jump into what I believe to be one of the most underrated brands in independent watchmaking. Laurel Ferrier, founded in 2008, launched its first watch in 2010. 2015 gave us the Galet Square that you see right here, 41 millimeters in rose gold, and 2017 gave us the Galet Régulateur design. Combine the square with the Régulateur, and you get this watch. Vertical satin finish on a slate dial. We have rose gold hands. We have the hours, the minutes, and the seconds separate, so it's a regulator. And then turn it all over, and you get the micro rotor movement that launched back in 2013. Automatic winding with a 3-day power reserve. It's actually about 80 hours all told, and it is very sophisticated. Free sprung with an overcoil, 21.6 beat rate. Take a look, a jeweled staff and a pawl system used for the rotor. That's not necessarily the system you want if you plan to beat on your watch, but for a dress watch, it's ideal because it is super silent. You can't hear it, you can't feel it, and note that the pivot of the rotor, the actual pivot of the staff, is set in a golden chaton pocket watch style. Take a close look. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 interior angles. Those sharp creases where 2 beveled surfaces meet, that's the hallmark of truly fine hand finish. Note how broad, luminous, and gradiated the Côte de Genève are. They're light on one side, dark on the other. That's usually the sign of a very slowly applied abrasive Côte de Genève rather than a cheaper stamped kind. Black polished screws, black polished balance cock, a black polished bridge for the micro rotor, engine turning on the base plate, all screw heads black polished with chamfered slots and circumference. This watch rewards close viewing. Satination on all the wheels, there's an engraving on the rotor, and then we have a double direct impulse escapement system with no Swiss lever. The result is improved precision. It's adjusted in 6 positions, not the mere 5 of a standard chronometer, and with that double direct impulse system, like the Breguet natural escapement, there is no Swiss lever. The escape wheels direct their energy directly against the balance's roller, so the balance is impulsed only in its direction of travel, alternately by each of these wheels. A very, very sophisticated movement, beautifully finished. They have a woman, Coralie Amberti, who finishes these watches in-house. While Laurel Ferrier isn't a tablisseur, buying its parts from the best in the business, including La Fabrique du Temps for their movements, they do all of their finishing and chronometric adjusting in-house, and they make about 170 watches a year. Hugely underrated. Short of Chronometrie Fernand Berthoud or perhaps Grubel Forsey, this is the finest finish you will find in the business. And that goes too for Romain Gauthier. I would actually say Romain Gauthier is slightly above the level of Laurel Ferrier. I do believe they are on par with Grubel Forsey and Fernand Berthoud. I would even go so far as to say, if pressed, I might count this as the best finish in the industry, bar none. This is the logical one. Launched in 2013, it won the GPHG Complication Prize, and it became the iconic watch of Romain Gauthier. It is also being discontinued this year. Given that Romain Gauthier only makes 50 watches a year, less than half of which are the logical one, you get a sense of just how rare this watch is. 43 millimeters in white gold. The case design is beautiful. Sculpted, handsome, nuanced, and detailed. It has a combination of media blasted recesses and lovely polished facets. The case is 43 millimeters, and you can see you actually wind the watch using a pusher over at 9 o'clock, and there's a stop works, so the movement will not run when it's past its chronometric power reserve, so it will stop rather than keep bad time. And because of the stop works, there's enough energy in the barrel that as soon as you start winding, the watch springs into action. You set the watch using the crown up at 2 o'clock. The dial, both for the hours, minutes, and seconds, grand faux enamel in white, blueprinted, and you can see there's a lovely frosted set of bridges and plates below hand-finished superstructure. You have exterior points, interior points, black polish everywhere, and dozens of interior angles and exterior points. Some Geneva Hallmark movements will feature one or no interior angles or exterior angles, that is sharp inward creases or outward points. This watch features more than you can count. Note the entire chain for the fusee has been black polished, and inside the chain you can just see there are ruby roller jewels, 26 of them inside the chain. The chain winds from the barrel to the fusee. The fusee is a snail cam system, so it always keeps the barrel wheel and the fusee system in line, unlike a conventional spiral cone fusee, where the chain will actually lose a little bit of energy because it has to wrap up and around the fusee. As the energy of the mainspring barrel wears down, the chain pulls a larger effective diameter of the snail cam, creating greater mechanical leverage, greater mechanical advantage. So for the 46-hour power reserve, balance amplitude is equal. Free-sprung 28/8 beat rate, Romain Gaultier even building his own balance and his own wheel train. You can see the wheel within a wheel motif used on Gaultier's distinctive wheels. Power reserve indicator on the reverse side, open barrel, black polished screws, but you can see they have their own slot pattern that allows for the application of more torque. You can see just how broad and beautiful the bevels are, even broader than Ferrier, and Ferrier is some of the best in the business. This watch is beyond belief. And at 43 millimeters, it's a large timepiece, so if your wrist is like mine, my wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference, you're going to wear it well and really enjoy it. The ultimate in high horology finish and exclusivity. A watch that will never be mistaken for anything but a Romain Gaultier. Heavy hitters on deck. Here comes the Alanguzona 1815 Rattrapant perpetual calendar, 41.9 millimeters in platinum. This model came out in 2013, and while it's not a limited edition, price and complexity will limit the effective population of these watches. Split-second chronograph. The moon phase disc is made of solid white gold. The dial is made of solid sterling silver. You have a power reserve indicator for the 42-hour manual wind reserve de manche, and you have that up at 12 o'clock. You have the split-second chronograph capability with 2 column wheels, so the perpetual calendar, the moon phase, the power reserve, and the split-second capability. The feel for either column wheel is world class. The dial is balanced, colorful, and packed full of information. Turn it all over. This is caliber 101. Note that there are not one, but 2 separate freehand engraved surfaces on this movement. German silver, that nickel copper zinc alloy, giving it its golden hue. The silver parts are made of steel. Those are the chronograph components. They're beveled beautifully on their edges and satinated on their tops. We have both engraved and striped bridges for the rest of the watch. You can see that the beveling is as good as anything you'll find in Switzerland. Mirrored, flawless, and hand applied. We have golden jeweled chaton fixing the pivot jewels, and you can see those are held in place by blued screws, but we have both black polished screws and blued screws. The polished screws are used to adjust the mechanisms, the timing, the chronograph, and the time of day. The blued screws are used to hold fixtures in place. Instantaneous jumping minutes, and as you can see, there is a pincer system at the center for the split-second capability. And what that does is it will stop the second hand. We'll fire back up. It will stop that second reference hand, and then there's a decoupler built in. Really only Patek Philippe and Lange are using a decoupler system so that the movement doesn't slow down and drag when the split-second hand is stationary. You get all of that, and of course a movement that is as deep and gorgeous as a rainforest. You're staring down through the canopy at the wildlife, the flora and the fauna beneath, and there is an endless diversity in this watch. A watch you can appreciate perhaps recognizing a new detail every time you inspect it for years of ownership, and it comes with a full deployant clasp and matching platinum. That is not a feature commonly included on Longo watches. It's not as big as you would think. It's thick, and you can see that, but at under 42 millimeters, it's not unwearable on my wrist. And I think with a 16 centimeter circumference wrist, even a 15 centimeter circumference wrist, you're going to wear this watch well and really enjoy the fit, the feel, and the proportion. Now, an absolute beast. This is a model launched in 2019, effectively as the 20th anniversary FP Journe Tourbillon. The timepiece, technically the Tourbillon Souverain, but everyone calls it the Tourbillon Vertical. This is the Black Label model. 42 millimeters in platinum with a black dial. Black Label, in general, is a super restricted series available only through FP Journe boutiques and espaces, and then only to prior buyers of new FP Journe watches. Black Label gives you that exclusivity, and the look is unique to the series. As we get the black dial with the platinum case, only Black Label offers that. You can see there's a lovely hobnail guilloche cut into the dial base, and then the time-telling features are on grand faux enamel in white. The tourbillon is the tourbillon vertical. Why? Because when the watch is on your dresser, it's always going to be in some position that puts the tourbillon in the same orientation with respect to gravity, regardless of how your watch sits on your dresser at night. Upside down, the tourbillon is vertical. Right side up, the tourbillon is vertical. Crown up, the tourbillon is vertical. Crown down, the tourbillon is vertical. Meaning, for the portion of the day when the watch is not on your wrist, it will serve the age-old pocket watch intent of a tourbillon that evens out the effect of gravity. Because it has that same orientation no matter how it sits on your dresser at night, it is going to be telling better time, that is more consistent time, than a typical tourbillon wristwatch, which will often put the axis of the tourbillon in the same plane as the dial, which is not useful for evening out the effects of gravity. Now, the watch has an 80-hour power reserve rather than the original Tourbillon Souverain and Tourbillon Remontoire, which were 40 to 42 hours. It also has a 30-second tourbillon, so you can see that tourbillon makes one circuit every 30 seconds. It's more dynamic, it's more visually impressive. You can see it has a polished conical surround and a black polished set of bridge anchors on its side, and then when you flip it over, the entire movement, which still includes the remontoire d'égalité or the constant force device, it is rose gold. So gold inside of platinum. This is a very hefty and impressive watch. All of the steel surfaces of the remontoire constant force mechanism have been black polished, and the spring itself is titanium. It tops off the energy in the escapement once every second, so down to approximately 48 hours of power reserve remaining, or I should say 48 hours elapsed, because this is an inverse power reserve scale. So 48 hours elapsed, it will maintain constant balance amplitude. You can see there's also a concave mirrored profile on the underside that allows you to view and appreciate the underside of the tourbillon. This level of finishing is higher than what you'll find on a standard Journe watch. Yes, Journe does reserve a special standard of finish for truly high-end flagship models like the chiming watches, like the celestial complication, like the tourbillon vertical. Now, I mentioned a reverse power reserve. It's like a marine chronometer. Marine chronometers had to be wound exactly 24 hours apart to maintain constant timekeeping for the sake of navigation. So when this watch is fully wound, it indicates 0. That means 0 hours since it was wound. 24 means 24 hours since it was wound, and 48 means 48 hours or 2 days since it was wound. It tells you how long since a full wind, not how much longer it will run. Though with experience, you'll learn just fine to read it both ways. This is the gem of the whole show, because this is the rarest watch, as only 2 examples of any given model can be made Black Label in a given year, and this model has only been available since 2019. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase, pricing, accessory, and condition details of any watch you saw on today's show.